Welcome, Exiles! So in my previous video, I showed you guys how I applied Blood Mage tech to a Stormweaver to achieve near immortality with spell mana cost to life cost conversions in order to get ridiculous amounts of life regen when casting spells thanks to the Sacrifice of Blood keystone. But I wasn't fully satisfied with my boss DPS in that build, so I sat down to theory craft again and try and figure out a way to utilize the crazy amounts of life regen that we get while also figuring out a way to justify going Stormweaver over Blood Mage, and I think I might have succeeded. Since cold spells have very high base crit chances, I get to stack crit to achieve near 100% crit chance on all of my spells. So adding cast on crit was a no-brainer. But since I'm also playing a Stormweaver, I get to apply 2 shocks through my spells, and because I utilize Flame Wall on bosses, I also apply Ignite. This meant that I could equip cast on Elemental Ailment as well, since I'll be chilling, igniting, and double shocking bosses. I put Comet on both of them, and to my surprise, it turned the Comets into literal machine guns. But how am I actually gaining so much energy at such a ridiculously rapid pace? Well, meet Frost Darts. Frost Darts got introduced into the game this league and has gone relatively under the radar. On a surface level, it seems like it's just a single target DPS skill with very low base damage, which would make it hard to scale in the endgame without infusions. However, Frost Darts has something very unique about it. It hits enemies multiple times per cast. Frost Darts shoots 3 projectiles. They can't chill or freeze, but they can still apply shock and ignite. When a Frost Darts projectile hits a chilled enemy, it creates 2 ice chunks that leap off the enemy and explode on the ground near him. If we combo it with infusions, each ice chunk explosion will create 3 more ice chunk explosions. Unfortunately, we'll not be utilizing infusions because of how clunky they feel, but we will be using the hitting a chilled enemy part in order to hit the target 6 times per cast, and of course, each hit can crit and apply 2 out of the 3 elemental ailments, which will give us massive amounts of energy for both our cast on crit and cast on elemental ailment. And since Sacrifice of Blood works with triggered spells, we can slap life tap everywhere to also boost our life regen even further while not really caring about ever running out of life. But that's not all. On my secondary weapon set, I'm also using the Whispering Ice Permafrost Staff, which gives Icestorm. This spell is basically the same as the old Firestorm, but it's blue and it's also on steroids. I talked about this spell in my previous video, and to summarize it, all you need to know is that it hits faster than Firestorm, has a limit of 3 instead of 1, and when it crits, it'll contribute energy to our cast on crit. When we combo it with Zarok's Refrain Lineage Gem, we cast 3 Ice Storms in 1 button click, so this spell will essentially be hitting bosses around 10 extra times per second. Combined with Frost Darts and all the various forms of cast speed that we have, this means that we'll be hitting bosses upwards of 30 times per second. And don't worry, weapon set swaps are instant and seamless nowadays, so you should be utilizing them. This combo is so good for energy generation that you don't even need to use Comet for damage. Every spell that doesn't have a cooldown and is not a channeling spell will work. For example, you can use extra Frost Darts to make a railgun, you can use Ball Lightning to make this sick laser looking thing, you can combo Lightning Warp with the Ball Lightnings to give yourself a seizure, you can even use fireballs with Living Bomb to crash your PC. The options are limitless, and honestly, all of them work, so use whatever you think looks the coolest. I've personally decided to go with Comet because it's just a simple big damage kaboom. I will leave a POV of my character in the video description, but before I get into the setup, I want to quickly mention that this character is almost fully min-maxed. You don't actually need majority of the gear, runes, and gems that I have to get this build up and running, and there's only 3 mandatory uniques, 2 of which are really cheap, and the rest of the gear you can fit according to what you need. I'll start off with the gear. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be needing a Whispering Ice Permafrost Staff on our secondary weapon set. This weapon is absurdly good simply because of Ice Storm, and also a little bit because it provides us with elemental exposure on hit, which is pretty awesome to have against bosses. We'll be using Malagaro's Virtuosity Gloves to set our crit damage to 250%. This item is mandatory because because it'll allow us to use pinpoint critical support gem on all of our spells. In order to achieve super high crit chance, while ignoring the less crit damage that it would have given us. Since Frost Darts isn't great for map clear and is inherently designed for bosses, we'll be using Frostbolt for general trash clear, and we'll be comboing it with a Snake Pit Pro Ring on our left ring slot. This item isn't mandatory, but it is a massive boost to our overall clear speed, since it will cancel out Frostbolt's infinite pierce and instead provide it with Fork. This means that when the forked Frostbolt projectiles hit an enemy, they will explode, dealing AoE damage to the target and all other nearby targets. We'll be using a wand on our primary weapon set, and we want to get crit chance cast speed and +5 to level of all cold spells. The other stats aren't necessary, but they're nice to have for some extra damage. On the offhand, we'll be using a scepter instead of a focus. Scepters are the easiest and cheapest way of acquiring a ton of spirit, which we will need in order to be able to afford to use Cast on Crit, Cast on Elemental Ailment, and Blink. I've also opted into using Purity of Ice simply to help fix cold resistance a bit, but you can use Purity of Fire or Purity of Lightning depending on what resists you can get on your other rare pieces of gear. The rest of the stats on the Scepter don't really matter that much. On the Amulet, we want to get +3 the level of all spell skills, flat ES and % ES as well, and we'll be anointing it with Split Shot for some extra clear speed. Rarity is insanely good in PoE 2, but obviously it's not a mandatory stat for the build to work. I'm using a Darkness Enthroned belt with gained bonuses as though it was boots and 100% increased effect of socketed runes. This allows me to socket 2 movement speed runes and they'll get doubled up, which is pretty nice since movement speed is king in PoE 2, but obviously it's not needed. You can absolutely use any other belt and the build will function the exact same way. Just make sure it has at least 2 extra charm slots. The rest of the gear is primarily focused on fixing resists and getting as much ES as possible. For the charms, I'm using the standard stun and freeze immunity ones, and I've also got the Rite of Passage charm. Now, I know Rite of Passage is ridiculously expensive, and obviously it's not needed at all for this build, so if you don't have one, just use a slow immunity charm. If you can afford it, you can also upgrade to the Fall of the Axe silver charm for the occasional onslaught buff when you get slowed. The runes I'm using are 3 crit runes on the Whispering Ice Staff, +1 to levels of all spell skills on the wand, +10% spirit on the scepter, 2 chaos resistance runes on the helmet to reduce the effect of curses on the body armor, 10% movement speed on the belt and boots, and Kurgo's Gaze Abyssal Rune on the gloves for 40% increased effect of Arcane Surge. All of these are replaceable with alternative cheaper options like increased energy shield, spell damage, or just more resists. For catalyst qualities, we'll be using Caster on the Snake Pit Ring, Cold on the Rare Ring, and Defense on the Amulet. The tree is very similar to the setup I showed in the previous video, with very minor adjustments here and there. We're focusing mainly on getting as much spell damage, crit chance, and energy shield as possible while getting some useful notables here and there. Make sure you take Ascetism so you don't get perma-stunned, touch the Arcane for some extra increased effect of Arcane Surge, and Sanguimantic Rituals to convert the % more mana regen that Arcane Surge provides into % more life regen. Mind Over Matter provides us with a damage buffer zone between our life and energy shield for some extra safety, and Zealot's Oath applies our life regen to our energy shield when our life gets fully topped up. Base stats don't matter for us that much, so get as much dex, strength, and int as you need in order to fit all the gear and gems. For the jewels, we'll be using Undying Hate, specifically with Tribute to Tech Rod. This jewel converts nearby notables and keystones into alternative Abyss versions. We'll primarily be using it to convert a nearby keystone into Sacrifice of Blood. Without this keystone, the build does not function at all, so this jewel is mandatory. It's a bit expensive, but definitely worth it. I'm still using a From Nothing jewel with Unwavering Stance in order to allocate Hail Heart and the 2 small passives near it for some increased life recovery rate. Prism of Belief with +3 to level of all Frost Dart skills, and Heart of the Well are very nice jewels to have in order to scale our boss damage a bit more, but they're not necessary for the build to function. And you can replace them with regular rare jewels with spell damage or elemental damage. On the Ascendancy, we're still using Constant Gale to get Arcane Surge up permanently. Force of will increase the effect of Arcane Surge by 20% per 10% missing mana. This means that if our mana ever goes down, our life regen will skyrocket, and so will our energy shield regen. Strike Twice will allow us to apply 2 shocks, and Shaper of Storms will allow us to actually apply the shocks. Now it's time for the gems. We're getting Purity of Ice, as I mentioned earlier, and we're linking it with Cold Mastery and Uhtred's Omen for some extra levels, or in other words, extra cold rest. Uhtred's Omen is optional, so you can skip the support gem if you're tight on currency. On Icestorm, we'll be linking Pinpoint Critical for some extra crits, Zarok's Refrain Lineage support gem to get 3 casts per click. This also puts a cooldown of 5 seconds on the spell, but that's completely fine because its base duration is 6 seconds anyway, so we'll always have it up. Concentrated Area to tighten the storm radius so more overall ice bolts hit the target, and Life Tap to convert its mana cost to life, which will make it a bit more comfortable to use. Frostbolt is going to be our main general trash clearing spell, and we'll be linking it with Pinpoint Critical for some extra crits, Valanta's Propulsion Lineage support gem because it'll give us 50% of our cast speed as increased projectile speed, which Frostbolt is in dire need of. Rapid Casting 2 to increase our cast speed and prod speed a bit further, Life Tap to convert mana costs into life costs, and Nova Projectiles for some extra AoE coverage. You can swap out Nova Projectiles for Scion's Temper Lineage support gem if you wish, but that's up to you. I personally prefer Nova Projectiles because it consistently provides me with tons of frostbolts all over the place, and I don't really mind the 40% less damage since everything that isn't a rare or unique monster in maps gets evaporated anyway, and in many cases rare monsters get exploded when they're standing near big packs of normal and magic monsters. Frost Darts is going to be our main big beefy monster killer. If there's a rare that's still alive after the waves of frostbolts, chuck some Frost Darts his way to delete him. We'll be linking it with Pinpoint Critical for some extra crits again, Rapid Casting 2 so we shoot the Frost Darts faster, Cold Pen will help us against rares and bosses, especially in maps that have monsters have additional elemental resistances, Atalui's Bloodletting to convert the mana costs into life costs, and because it'll provide us with a ton of damage gained as extra physical based on how much the spell costs. And lastly, Embitter to convert all the various gain damages extra into gain damages extra cold. Embitter will help us scale cold damage way easier, so you should definitely be using it in combination with Atalui's. On Mana Tempest, we have Lightning Mastery for an extra level, Life Tap to convert the mana drain into life drain, and Uhtred's Augury for some extra levels. Mana Tempest's life drain works in combination with Sacrifice of Blood, so when it drains our life, it'll simultaneously give us life regen as well, and we don't even have to stand in it since the additional effect from its quality allows us to keep its effects for 2 seconds after leaving the storm, so we'll only be using it in combination with Frostbolt while running around in juiced maps where we want some extra AoE damage and tankiness. We won't be using it against bosses though, since it'll only mess up our machine gun tech. Also, Uhtred's Augury is optional, so you can skip it if you're tight on currency. We'll be using Elemental Weakness on bosses in order to easily shred the resistances. We're already applying Elemental Exposure through our Icestorm, so this combos amazingly well. We're using Heightened Curse to increase the magnitude of the Eliras Shred, Prolonged Duration 2 so the curse lasts longer, Life Tap to convert its mana cost to life, Cursed Ground so it applies almost instantly when we cast it without any delay, and Cold Mastery to give it an extra level for some more Eli Shred. We'll be using Flame Wall only on bosses, because when our Frost Darts projectiles pass through it, it'll give them flat added fire damage and the ability to apply Ignite. We'll be linking it with Fortress 2 and Spell Cascade for decent area coverage, Prolonged Duration 2 so it lasts longer, Life Tap to convert its mana costs into life costs, and Fire Mastery for some extra levels. On both of our Cast on Crit and Cast on Elemental Ailment, we'll be using an identical setup of Comet's Efficiency 2 to make it cheaper and guarantee that we'll always have sufficient life to pay the cost when we proc it, with Life Tap to convert its mana costs into life, Energy Retention for a chance of refunding half the energy, and Boundless Energy 2 to increase our energy generation. Feel free to experiment here with whatever other gems you might like, but these ones work best for me. And finally, on Blink we have Cooldown Recovery 2 and Warm-Blooded. Warm-Blooded is optional, but I have the extra spirit for it, and it's actually really helpful in maps where monsters do tons of cold damage and end up freezing you way more than what the freeze immunity charm can handle. If you're absurdly rich, you can try and get some additional spirit on your gear so you can fit in either Arctic armor for another layer of defense or Archmage for some extra damage. Both of these are entirely optional and are just another form of min-maxing that you can chase. I want to quickly mention that you must set up all of your spells, including the cast on crit and cast on elemental ailment, to only cast with your wand and scepter in weapon set 1. This will ensure that you efficiently and effortlessly swap between your weapons when you cast spells, so you never have to press the actual weapon swap button. Also, since GGG removed our ability to select blink to a specific weapon set, we have to instead select our cast on crit and cast on elemental ailment to specifically weapon set 1, which should be the wand and scepter. Otherwise, the game will not allow you to use blink despite having sufficient spirit with your primary weapons. And don't worry, Icestorm will still be generating energy for a cast on crits, even when it's not selected. Also, don't forget to vow your Frostbolt, Frost Darts, cast on crit, and cast on elemental ailment to level 21. Perfect jeweler orbs are cheap nowadays, and the extra level that you get from the corruption will have a massive impact on your overall DPS. It's also super easy to do, so you should definitely try and get it done whenever you have some currency to spare. Here's how to do it if you're not aware of this tech. Grab a bunch of random lower level cheap uncut gems, engrave them to whichever spell you like, quality up the spell, 6-link it, and then vol it and hope you get the +1 level corruption outcome. If you don't, rinse and repeat until you do. Once you have a gem with +1 level from corruption, sock it in your skills tab and make sure you remove other copies of that spell from the skills tab. Then grab a level 20 uncut gem, upgrade your corrupted skill, and you're done. And you don't even need to 6-link the spells that you will be socketing in your cast on crit and cast on elemental ailment, since those don't need sockets. Only the spirit gems need sockets. That about covers everything for this build. I've been having tons of fun with it over the last week, face tanking everything, AoEing monsters from 2 screens away, machine gunning bosses down in seconds, and in general farming all types of content that PoE 2 has to offer, and I hope you guys will enjoy it as much as I did. If you guys have any questions or recommendations, drop them down in the comments below, and I'll reply back to you as soon as I can. If you liked the video and you wish to see my future Path of Exile content, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video. Stay sane, Exiles.